Recording in progress.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. We are going to call this meeting to order now. It is 6:39 on August 17, 2023, and this is a public meeting of the City of Portland Police Accountability Commission. Please note that the public portion of this meeting will be between 8 and 9, and then the PAC will move into an executive session. If the Spanish language interpreters, Liz or Sasha, can please give the information on the Spanish language interpretation.
Esta es una junta pública sujeta a las leyes del Estado de Oregon y las reglas administrativas de la ciudad de Portland y será grabada. Habrá interpretación al español disponible para esta junta. Para poder acceder a la interpretación debe pulsar sobre el icono del globo al fondo de su pantalla y luego interpretación y seleccionar español. Puede enmudecer el audio original y solo escuchar el intérprete, pero continuará viendo la presentación original. Gracias.
Gracias. The city also offers ASL interpretation, which is being provided by Maria and Ophelia. Please pin their video feed to see their interpretation throughout the meeting. The closed captioning is turned on in Zoom as another means of assistance. But please note that this is an automatic captioning services and it is not always accurate. The city supports access to meetings of the Police Accountability Commission and can provide other language support as well. Please email in advance of future public meetings, either as a response to a public meeting notice or directly to policeaccountability@portlandoregon.gov to ask for other access assistance, including interpretation into other languages. This meeting is a public meeting subject to City of Portland Administrative Code and Oregon State Law and is being recorded. For this meeting, the chat function is enabled for commission members to communicate with each other. Members of the public will be able to ask questions using Zoom Q&A feature. As the commissioners are presenting and are discussing things, if attendees have questions, please feel free to submit them through the Q&A. We hope to use this feature to help guide our conversation during the meeting and future meetings agenda topics. We'd like to be clear that no questions will be answered during the meeting, but if answered, both the question and answer will be visible to you and will become part of the meeting record. To access this feature, just click on the Q&A icon in the middle of your screen. Now I will pass it to the co-chairs for the land acknowledgement.
Hi, this is Dan Handelman. I use he, him pronouns, and I have a loud fan in the background that I can't turn off at the moment. Sorry about that. I am one of the three co-chairs for this final phase of our work, and I'm about to read the city's land acknowledgement, which is not as strong as it would be if I were writing my own, but this is what we've got from the city, so that's what we're going to say. We acknowledge that the rivers, lakes, streams, and lands of the lower Willamette River rest upon the occupied territories of the Multnomah, Wasco, Cowlitz, Calumet, Clackamas, Chinook, Tualatin, Kalapuya, Molalla, and many other tribes. We recognize the many villages, traditions, cultures, and relationships that existed along the river since time immemorial. We recognize these tribes stewarded these lands and rivers since time immemorial for future generations. We recognize and undertake responsibility for the destruction of the river and land, of traditional food sources, sacred places, and multifaceted ways of life. We acknowledge the economic and social values that enabled the harm to the river, including systemic racism, classism, and other systems of oppression that perpetuated harm against Black, Indigenous, and immigrant communities along the river. With this acknowledgement, we commit to honoring and learning from the past and working towards a more equitable and sustainable future for the lower Willamette River. We commit to seeking solutions that acknowledge the inequities of the past socioeconomic policies and the harm done to people and our relationships to these lands and waters. Thank you.
Thank you, Co-Chair Dan. Now we're gonna review our community agreements. There are 3 pages, and I will ask the question at the end. Now that everyone read the community agreements, do we all commit to following the community agreements for today's meeting and to gently call in our colleagues, if collaborators, if needed, and if I can see your hands? Thank you very much. I will pass it to the co-chairs. I believe is co-chair Sima to discuss the timeline. Thank you.
Yes, greetings, everybody. Thank you. Yeah, so currently, as you see, the Police Accountability Commission, we've split our work up into 6 phases, and we're now in the concluding phase of our work, the final phase, which focuses on taking everything that was done in the previous phases and converting it into proposed changes to the city code and the settlement agreement, and approving those for city council consideration along with the report. On to the next slide. Sorry, focusing on my notes here. The commission, what we're doing is that we're working until the end of August 31st, and we're going to present our proposals to the city council for their consideration and approval in September, a date that we're still working on, to be announced. Now, also what we're currently doing is that our outcome documents, the police accountability that creating is in this phase include all right, so we have proposed changes to the city code, final reports to the Police Accountability Commission, which will include some explanations and rationales for the legal text, recommendations for the board's bylaws or the Bureau's policies, recommended changes to the settlement agreement, and recommendations to other levels of government, such as city council. And on to slide 9. All right, so this slide is the project plan for the concluding phase of the Police Accountability Commission's work. It's for members of public to be able to understand how the commission gets from now to the end of this phase, our final phase again. The blue boxes straight down the middle are the public meetings, and the pink boxes below are consultations with the Police Accountability Commission's attorneys / outside legal counsel. So today's meeting falls into blue boxes with the purple border right screen. And on the next page, here we go. So following today, here are the upcoming meetings of the Police Accountability Commission. Just the ones that we'd like to highlight. There's a youth and family focused community information session tomorrow. It's Friday, August 18th, 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. at the Mekong Bistro. It's across the street from Daniel High School. It'll be hybrid, so you can join on Zoom. Please bring your family. I'll be there with mine. There's food as well. Great info session, and good to do it while you're eating. The commission will also meet every Monday and Thursday from 6:30 p.m. to 9. With some meetings running long, quite often they do. I think by hapstance and miracle, we ended maybe a few minutes early last week. But we're doing this until August 31st, the end of the month. The next meeting is Monday, the 21st at 6:30. And is expected to include finishing discussion on the city code and starting to discuss the draft final report. So moving on to the next slide. Review of today's meeting purpose. So today we're going to continue, sorry for the beeps here. Today we're going to continue members reporting back and then commissions reviewing that are inputs into ongoing processes of the Police Accountability Commission, finalizing its recommendations. These documents include city council feedback, the final checklists of tasks, the community input tracker, the discussion group reports. I'll be reporting on one tonight. The equity reviews and values and goals, and staff suggestions based off of gap contradictions or technical edits. That was a lot. I hope you're following along. This will include report backs from members who volunteered to report back on some of these documents. Now, following that, there'll be continued discussion on the draft code regulations from the commission. As you know, this is one of two items the commission has had to finalize before concluding its work. And our timeline is to discuss 7 proposed changes today before going into executive session, with 4 remaining ones pretty much to discuss next Monday, as well as any last minute proposed changes received between now and then. A lot to do before we conclude before the end of the month, and very little time to do it. And finally, later today, we'll also have general public comment and welcome the public's input into our work. After that, we'll go into executive session, and I'll hand the keys back to our facilitator.
Thank you, Co-Chair Sima. Now we're going to hear updates from staff about community engagement, and I will pass it to Austin.
Hi, good evening. Sorry, I was eating dinner because a girl gotta eat. My name is Austin Foster. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Community Engagement and Communications Coordinator for the Police Accountability Commission. Let's see here, updates. We had an event today, like kind of private event with IPAC, and let the co-chairs know kind of everything that was discussed in there. I think it went pretty well. And we do have that event that CMOB mentioned tomorrow evening at Mekong Bistro. So I think we've got a good chunk of y'all that are going to be coming, like 5 or 6 commissioners, and hopefully you can bring your families and come on out. We are going to have salad rolls and spring rolls and chicken wings and things like that. So it should be a really fun time. That's at 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. And if you aren't able to join us in person, you can join us on Zoom as well. And we are expecting, thank you, Dan. We are expecting between 80 to 100 youth and their families there. And Mike Myers, the director of the Community Safety Division, will be there, as well as the Deputy Director, Elizabeth Rez. So really looking forward to that event. I think that's going to be really beneficial for y'all to just spread the message to a lot of the youth who are like directly impacted by this work. So that is going to be our second to last public community engagement event. And then we are having that private session with just Spanish-speaking business owners that Victoria will be leading on Saturday at Bar Kala. And I believe we've got 6 or 7 of you also signed up to come to that event. That's going to be 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. And that's going to have snacks and beverages as well. That one is just going to be in person. And then our last community engagement event, people, crazy. That is going to be on Tuesday, the 22nd from 6 to 8 p.m. at the Oregon Association for Minorities Entrepreneurs building, which is right next to Delta Park on Hayden Meadows Drive, I believe it is. And you should have all that info in the invite as well. That one is from 6 to 8 p.m. And sorry, no wonderful food there, just your regular old snacks that I usually bring. But it should be a good time. And I think that I think we're going to be going out strong because we've got a lot of media articles that just came out in the last couple of days. So I think there's definitely going to be a lot of people at these next 3 events. So thank you guys for sticking with it and volunteering your time even more. Really appreciate you. And then as far as like reporting back community engagement stuff, I will be giving Samir a report on the 21st with everything from the last 11 months of work that I've done for all of the community engagement events and all of that feedback. So we'll be presenting that in like tables and graphs, as well as general data and things like that. So that will then go to co-chairs, I believe, and then y'all will be getting that info. So that's kind of it from me, y'all. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for all the work you're doing. Next item in the agenda, we're gonna move to review values and goals before we start a discussion. And I will pass it to staff and co-chair Charlie.
You want me to go first?
Yeah, you can go.
Okay. Charlie Michelle Wesley, co-chair and commissioner. Just want to say, like, you guys probably know this, I keep these close to my side at all times, these goals and values. Sorry. So I'll just read one part of it. We believe people that have been killed or harmed by police may have had their civil rights violated. Their rights to liberty and life by the very system that professes to protect and serve them. These lives had value. That's all. To you, staff.
Thank you, Co-Chair Charlie. And thank you for being among those who always keep this close to the front of mind. The values and goals were adopted on March 4th, 2022 by the PAC to guide their work. There are a couple pages here. First page is a summary, and then there are 6 values listed here and then built out more in the next pages. There each has 1 or 2 corresponding goals and several success criteria or considerations, which are self-imposed metrics by which the PAC can measure its own work before sending it off to City Council. We're going to scroll through it quickly, and I'm not going to make any comments or anything. We'll just do a quick scroll through and then ask if folks want to revisit any part of it or highlight any part. Please note that numbers 3 and 5 are split up by a page break, so it'll be a little bit will be a little gap there. Thanks.
Samir, before we go on to that, can you just take a moment to just acknowledge Charlie? Because that was obviously very physically hard, and just want to make sure that you know that we are here for you as team members and as your community. And we thank you for being brave enough to speak your piece. And we hold it for you.
Thank you, Facilitator Ayomide, for bringing this to our attention. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. I'll pass it back to facilitators, or if members want to highlight anything, feel free to ask if you want anything scrolled back to as well. Thanks.
Thank you. Let me see if any of the members would like to comment or review anything in particular. Yes, Coach Sheridan?
Well, we're about to get through the equity review that Co-Chair Michelle Wesley and I went through. But while we're going through that, we talked about harm reduction and about something I mentioned about how people have been through the existing system and then they don't get the outcome they want, just give up because they feel like the whole thing was just traumatizing. And Commissioner Glenn mentioned something about this too, about how some people might not want to be at the hearings in a public setting. So I want to bear that in mind because that was something that the equity analysis told us about those reviews of unwanted police outcomes that we have put into our areas of agreement as well.
Thank you, Coach Sheridan. Okay. Is there anything else? I will pass on the next item on the agenda. I think we can move to slide 15, please. Next, members can discuss anything that come out in their document review that you like to bring to your colleagues' attention. They may help in updating the document later today. Members volunteered at previous meetings to read and report back. In addition to reporting back, you can discuss anything that comes from these documents that might help you develop your code recommendations. Is there any of the members that would like to make a comment or report back? Yes, Commissioner Monica.
Good evening, you guys. Monica Arce, Commissioner. Well, first I want to say that we've been doing this work for a long time now, and it's been really, really hard. And I just want to acknowledge, Charlie, that I know it's hard. And you know, just to know that you're kind of stuck in this system where things move so slowly, and it doesn't seem like it recognizes all the work that we're putting into this sometimes, right? But hey, man, we're still here and we're almost done. So I reviewed the discussion group with the neighborhood associations, and in the neighborhood association report, the things that the takeaways in the last page, these reports come with a takeaway page in the last. The ones that stood out for me was they want us to provide more information on how these proposed changes would survive potential legal challenges from the police unions, which I think is a very interesting question. Increased transparency in the formation and work of the PAC. I think that we've been meeting for so long, and it's been such a hard thing to follow that it has been really, it seems like it's fallen into like, I don't think people just know about what we're doing really anymore, right? So I think it's not an issue of transparency. It's just like it's hard to pay attention for this long. But that was one of the things that came out of the discussion group. They do propose making changes to the compensation of the PAC, such as that diversity in the board can be achieved. They including considering adding transportation and parking reimbursements to allow people that are in the board to be able to get there easily and not make enough a financial hardship. They recommend creating a Bureau Advisory Committee of citizens tasked with paying attention to the PAC budget. I think that our recommendation to the board to have a subcommittee on budget fits this recommendation because the board is going to be made of citizens, right? So I think what they were thinking of is something separate, but that was a recommendation there, creating rules regarding the ability of the PAC board member to be removed for cause. Offering protections to the PAC board to ensure that police don't target them. That's something that's come up for us before as how we can do that. Creating a mechanism to vet for false or frivolous complaints. And providing diversity training and psychological or mental health training for PAC board members. Those were the takeaways.
Thank you, Commissioner Monica, for reporting back and for taking the time to read the reports and really bring it to everybody's attention. We appreciate that. Is there anybody else that would like to report? Yes, Commissioner Debbie.
Yeah, I'm ready for the one on the garden plot. So this was a little bit like finding a needle in the haystack, some of these things, but I'm going to go through them. There were 15 items on the garden plot list. And first one, define what trauma-informed lens means. And I could not find a definition in our documents. Next one, ask city attorney why complainant cannot be involved in all aspects of the process. And my comment on this is this may have happened, but I don't know where to find the answer. Number 3, include data from current system in new system reports. And then in parentheses, it says include in transition plan. So I did not find this in the reporting section of the code, but the transition plan includes requirements to transfer all the information on complaints and investigations to the transition team and then to the new oversight board. So that's kind of taken care of in the transition plan. But I wasn't quite sure what this meant. And I thought if it did mean that the kind of information that's included in IPR's annual report and quarterly reports and their dashboard, if it means that, then that did not appear that was included in the code or anywhere else. Number 4, create description of complaint navigator's role. And it's in the oversight staff areas of agreement, but it's also partially covered in the code on pages 44 and 53. Number 5, how does initial training for board members take place? And that's covered in the transition plan. Number 6, ask the city attorney the difference among employee, contractor, and volunteer. And we were provided with that information a while back. Number 7, does the mayor vote on board appointments starting in January 2025? The answer to that is no. And how board appointments are made is on page 21 in the draft code. The DOJ report, this number 8, DOJ report will not exist in the future, mention in transition plan. So on this one, there is a mention of DOJ in the transition plan in section B, but it doesn't really say that their presence is temporary. So that's partially taken care of, but not entirely. Number 9, include tort claim results and officer accountability section. And I could not find this in the code or in the officer accountability areas of agreement. Number 10, during powers and duties review, cross-check with old documents to double check what should be in structural oversight. And in parentheses, referring to audit records, et cetera, in areas of agreement of oversight staff. This one, to tell you the truth, I just was very confused by it. And so I just gave up. Number 11, recommend to new board that it change the code to allow it to hire independent legal counsel without auditor consent. And it appears to me that that's in the draft code on page 17, already taken care of. Number 12, ensure demographic questions are part of the application for board membership. Include age, geographic diversity, socioeconomic status, ethnicity, racial ability, expertise, gender identity. And that is included in the code on page 22 and 23. The one thing that's missing is geographic diversity. And number 13, draft bylaws and draft RFP for hiring director in phase 6. And the checklist says that was completed and superseded by the transition plan. 14, state statute requires officer interviews to take place when they are on duty. If they are off duty, they must be compensated for their time. So that isn't included in the code section on administrative investigations. That starts on page 39. And then the last one, the term case should replace complaints in all documents. And my understanding is that's still a work in progress. So that's what I found.
Thank you, Commissioner Debbie. Thank you for all the work you put into. Thank you very much. Very much appreciated. Okay, Co-Chair Charlie.
Yes, so I was tasked with the equity reviews. And so Dan and I went through them. I'm not going to read them all right now because they're going to be in the discussion and recommendations, but I will tell you that the broader system equity review and the officer accountability equity review, both these documents meet current equity standards. And I'm not sure if I have all the information, but that's what I have now. And we'll be looking at oversight staff. We'll be looking at, hold on, reporting and transparency, structural oversight. Yeah, those three as we move forward.
Thank you, Commissioner Charlie, for reviewing that as well. Thank you. Co-Chair Dan?
Yeah, I just want to kind of briefly go through that because there's stuff that doesn't result in a recommendation for us not to do anything because it's either taken care of or it should be dealt with by the board. So maybe staff, can you share the Word document that the updated equity Word document I sent this afternoon?
Yep, just a moment.
Yeah, so again, there's going to be a second equity review, which we still haven't seen, but these are the ones from the equity consultant that we got. So the first one has to do with oversight staff and having to do with engaging the community to hire the director, and we suggest that that should be taken care of by the board itself, that we don't have to give them that level of detail how they're going to engage the community. The second one has to do with conducting annual performance reviews, and we'll be talking about that later. The third one has to do with having requirements to the director be trauma informed, have an equity lens, and engage in engaging the community. And if you scroll down a little bit, you'll see we recommend adopting that one as well. Then we have also from oversight staff. This was the complaints cases thing that we just talked about, and so that's being dealt with as a technical fix. Then we have this B5A from oversight staff, which is anti-racism, anti-bias, and collaborative decision-making as part of the training or the background for the oversight staff. So, training requirements. Yeah, so we have that. We're going to be looking at that in the code update. The reporting and transparency introduction has a piece in it that didn't get a footnote, and we'll do, staff will deal with that. So then reporting and transparency had two things in the reports, the annual reports that were that the equity analysts asked us to deal with. One said death cases, and what did we mean by that? So we have some proposed language for that we're going to look at later. But it also asked about mediation, and we think, Co-Chair Michelle Westley and I think that the language we already have about mediation is sufficient. But of course, anybody else is welcome to disagree with our proposal. Next is also from reporting and transparency. This is accessibility for the website, and these are citywide requirements, and so I don't think we need to enter this into the code necessarily. I think it'll be, enforced one way or the other. But it's appreciated. We do need to make sure that the new board's website's accessible. Then it's structural oversight. There's stuff about adding equity and anti-racist lens to the draft policies. We have suggested language for that. Then we have the board subpoenaing documents to make policy recommendations. That's already in the code, so no change needed there. Next screen. Equity analysts want to have a trauma-informed process to engage the community. And this is for reviews of undesirable police-related incidents, which is what we decided to call Sentinel event reviews, primarily when we adopted that areas of agreement. In any case, we did not find anything in the code about these reviews. So we're suggesting to add that, but we're probably not going to get to it tonight because it's a little bit more complicated than just sticking some language in. So we'll probably look at that on Monday. Then we have another technical thing where the word police wasn't in front of the word chief, but it is now already. So no change needed there. And thank you to my co-chair for going line by line with me through that. And thank you to our consultant who gave us those equity suggestions.
Thank you, Co-Chair Dan, and thank you for the work you did too. Co-Chair CMAP.
Yeah, I actually had a discussion group report back as well. Is this a good place to kind of put it in? All right, so circling back to this, the discussion group for community members who have witnessed or experienced police misconduct, but chose not to file a complaint. As all of them are, this one was really interesting because I think, so the first post question to this was when you hear police accountability, and the feedback was, one, taking responsibility for their actions, admission, need to keep officers in check is a strong belief. Police accountability is associated with a lack of accountability, meaning it doesn't exist in the current system. This is their knowledge, it's their feeling and understanding, citing the previous attempts to hold police accountable for only those efforts to fail. So this is also have been common knowledge for the people who have chose not to report. They're doubtful as to how the current system will address their lived experiences with police and how much progress would be made in holding police accountable for reported misconduct in the new system. So knowing the fact that the old system has been there for over 20 years and it's pretty much the reason why they don't have faith, there's a healthy amount of skepticism as to like, well, how would this new system change this? How would we break the mold? The second one gets even better because their knowledge of current oversight systems, current system difficulties. Well, a lot of these folks go into detail as far as like their shared experiences. Like one was, one that stood out. A lot of these stood out, but one especially, as a 6-year-old, their mom was pulled over. They were in the vehicle, witnessed this with their mother, who was pulled over without cause and accused of a DUI. Even though they passed the breathalyzer, they were still made to take the walk, and still, passing all that, was still jailed. Now, as a 6-year-old child, the memory of sitting and waiting in a police station till like 3 a.m. in the morning was, terrifying and traumatic. And so this experience carried over into their present day. So, a lot of clear understanding, a lot of experiences as to like the shared experiences from these participants, and then I think jumping into my notes here, I think there were, asked if they were to experience or witness potential officer misconduct, what would they want to see happen? What are their hopes going into this? And, again, this starts off with, again, believing that currently misconducts that are the feeling was that they're swept under the rug. Cops they don't take things seriously enough and a lot of their complaints don't lead to investigations, whether it's even about misconduct or even just when they do have a contact with law enforcement that they initiated, that oftentimes their complaints aren't even taken seriously. So there's hope that having further accountability measures would help prevent further injustices. So a lot of the narrowing things down into like the recommendations, starting with number one, if you can scroll back to the previous, there you go. So, building trust and mutual respect between the police department and communities they serve through continual outreach interaction. So you're talking to a community that has been traumatized by law enforcement and by the lack of accountability with them, but still this community seeing a need for law enforcement, but to actually serve them and to feel like they can be served, but also an accountability process that would address those that are abusing their authority and being able to have the system recognize misconduct, because a system that recognizes misconduct can correct it. If a system is correcting it, then it's pretty much not fostering that type of law enforcement agent. The second one, increase cultural bias training for officers. This was really good because it does exist, but there's a difference between what currently exists in cultural bias training versus what is informed by community to make it further effective. And so their idea was that focus on understanding the best ways to deal with diverse and vulnerable communities by requiring officers to undergo specific amount of culturally responsive training every year. Again, these things currently happen, but how effective are they and how well are they informed? Increase use of dialogue to de-escalate difficult situations. People may not know why they're being arrested or why police are getting involved. There was also a participant who had stated earlier as an example that they were accused of theft, and there was a language barrier between the officer where there was pretty much no attempt, but it was up to them to bridge the language barrier to make things much more clear. And eventually the officer was able to understand that there was no case there and that they can actually move on. Implement strict penalties and incentives for behavior change within the police oversight system that will not limit inappropriate behavior and ensure that all misconduct is publicly acknowledged. Repercussions should also be implemented for officers who do not report misconduct from other officers. Ensure that all complaints received investigation. Thank you. Sorry, kids coming back from soccer. Also going into 6, implement processes that reward officers for keeping each other accountable. That was an interesting one to hear. Number 7, create internal processes that reduce the risk of people abusing the power of appeals and that ensure equal treatment of officers despite their skin color. That was based on several feedbacks within here as well. A lot of people felt like they weren't being taken seriously. They're being profiled. In one case, this person's mother was shot, and the complaint was not only disregarded by the investigating officer, but then the mother was asked if she was involved in gangs, therefore, racial profiling the victim who was shot. Also, create further outreach about the new system to over-police communities and communities of color. Consider expanding the authority of new organization to cover law enforcement throughout the Oregon state, which is great because there definitely is the ability to be able to advocate for policy change with the new oversight board. And continuing creating spaces where the new system can keep listening and learning from communities. So great feedback from people who really need to feel like they can trust and this new process coming in and how we can kind of win them over.
Thank you very much, Co-Chair Sima. That was very enlightening to know everything and the stories. They put a face of the work that you all are doing, right? They keep it human. Thank you. Is there any other member of the commission? Yes, Commissioner Tirsa, go ahead.
Hello. So the second group that I looked at was the discussion group for youth between 18 to 25 years old. And so participants in this group did not have any experience with a current oversight system, and neither had they heard of the PAC. But after a presentation, they had questions and offered some feedback. So several participants expressed that they had witnessed or been a victim of officer misconduct, specifically in the context of public transit, police, or store security. These participants would like to see accountability expanded to members outside of the PPB. In response to what participants believe could be helpful throughout the new complaint process, several participants expressed that having an advocate help navigate the process was something positive. And in response to what members believe could be a challenge part of the new process, several members expressed concern with the qualifications to serve on the board. And in response to whether anything needs to be added to the new proposed system, participants want to see more, want to know and see more information about compensation. There was support that members should be compensated fairly enough to be able to pay bills. Participants also want to see more information about qualifications of board membership. Overall, several of the participants agreed that they support the independence and autonomy of the board. And for recommendations, there were 4. The first one is clarifying the process of how to serve on the board. A recommendation to clarify the qualifications and requirements for service, such as residency, which we've looked at, educational, a quote criminal record, or a mental health diagnosis, and whether any of these could preclude someone from serving on the board. And then recommending a structured compensation system, such as a sliding scale. And then lastly, a suggestion that the new oversight system should not only apply to PPB, but also to other forms of law enforcement, such as retail security or personal or transportation. And that was it.
Thank you, Commissioner Tirsa, for reviewing and getting to, and the analysis is very valuable. Thank you very much for sharing with everyone. Thank you. Is there any other reports from the commissioners? Okay. Then I think we are ready for our next item on the agenda. And our next item on the agenda is introduction of draft code recommendation updates. And we will now move to discussing the updates draft of the city code recommendations. And I will pass it to the co-chairs to guide us.
Oh, okay, well, that's great. Well, staff shared with us a rather long list of what we're going to be looking at tonight. And as I hinted at when we're doing the last section, that there's stuff that we need to put off for Monday. But our goal is to finish the code package on Monday and start looking at the report then. So it looks like the sections that we have listed here, I'm going to put them on a piece of paper because I know they're going to disappear off the screen, are 35A, 35B, 35C, 35D, and 35E. Was there another screen of that? No. Okay, great. And so some of these, the origins of them have come from different places, but we have some that are more simple and some that might take a little more discussion, and I'll let the staff bring us to the first one, and we'll see what that is.
Thank you. So just to clarify there, 14 things. That slide is just designed for the public to get a feel for what's happening in the how the code is organized in general, and the 5 different sections. There are 14 things. So the version. Sorry, screen share is taking a second. Okay, so there are 14 things. I'm going to put those in the chat. This is a summary of the proposed change. It's not it's not the exact text, I guess is the best way to put it. And we'll just kind of walk through these as we go. So the very first thing is up in line 79. Which is still in 35A.010, the creation one. And it's the second one. The first one is a separate thing. So it's actually line 82, apologies. It's just noting that the oversight system, the bylaws, which is addressed in H, would be posted on the oversight system's website. So for facilitators, it's just the unhighlighted text. And then that's proposed by co-chairs.
Thank you. Okay, we can move to slides 18 and then 19. And we ask you to follow our normal discussion rules. We're gonna start a discussion. Please be brief each time you speak, even though you can speak multiple times. Please be facilitator, and remember, we use a weighted stack in our discussions. Finally, please be forward-looking in your comments. And who would you like us to get started? Co-chairs?
Oh, well, I mean, I think this makes sense, and I don't see any real controversy over the idea of posting the bylaws. I was thinking in my mind that, even with our staff being as diligent as they are, sometimes things don't happen right away. And I hope that nobody holds this board like out of for violating city code if the bylaws get passed one night and they're not posted that night. So I don't know if there's a way to phrase that with that leeway in there, but I think overall it makes sense.
Thank you. Okay, co-chair Charlie, would you like to read it?
Oh, I'm sorry. What would you like me to read?
What is highlighted, or I can read it, it's up to you, but I guess the process we have followed is you read what it needs to get approved or reviewed.
Oh, okay, I was distracted, sorry. Yeah, unless stated otherwise, all bylaws changes are effective upon adoption by the board. Copies of all current bylaws will be posted on the Oversight Systems website.
Thank you. Yeah, go ahead, Co-Chair.
My understanding is that, yeah, we're gonna, the first part of that, we're gonna put off till Monday, and this part, is what we're trying
Yes.
to review now. Yeah.
Yes, it's only the number 82nd. Okay. Is there any discussion? Questions or comments? Okay. Is there a strong opposition to changing from what it was to the proposed change on the 82nd? Is there a general agreement to changing from what it was to the proposed change? Thank you. Can we move on? Thank you.
All right, so this next one was something that came to our attention from the equity review, that the item that we called, and it's not summarized in the document here. The item that we called review of undesirable police-related outcomes, which is known in other cities as Sentinel event reviews, but that was kind of, $100 language, so we wanted to use this more explanatory term. The review of undesirable police-related outcomes was not in the proposed code. And as I've said many times, I'm worried that if we don't give the board authority something in code and somebody wants to challenge them for doing something like this, that we want to put it in the code to make sure they can do it. Right now, this is all of the language from the areas of agreement. So I think what we're going to do is just sort of let you know that we're planning on working on this again on Monday, and we're probably going to try to edit this down so it's more code friendly instead of being areas of agreement friendly. But that's just a heads up.
Thank you. And what I understand that I just learned that Co-Chair Charlie would like not to read, and Co-Chair Simab or Co-Chair Dan, would you like me to read? I can easily read, or you can read it. It's up to you.
Well, I'll leave it up to Co-Chair Hussaini if you'd like to read it. But for this particular one, I don't think we should read this because it's very long. We're going to try to get some better language.
Okay. Thank you. And the staff has
Yeah, so co-chairs, effectively, are you hoping to treat this like the previous one where it's flagged for further discussion on Monday?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, then we can wait to read it till then.
Okay, then let's move on.
All right, so, and I didn't see if you gave me a thumbs up or something, Co-Chair Hussaini, if you want to do the reading of the actual text. So the next one is about the details of the deadly force and death in custody cases. This is something I talked about very briefly in that in the equity review that we talked about. So it's in this section. This is what this whole section talks about, all the things that are required to be in the annual reports. And right now, the thing it says number of cases involving either use of deadly force or deaths in custody. So we were hoping to also add to this section language to put in the details about what the board did with the cases, what the outcomes were, and to the extent possible, the names of everybody. And this is an aside that's not going to be in the code, but I pointed out the Portland Police Bureau has a whole web page about officer-involved shootings where it names the officers and the people who were shot at, and the OIR group that does the reviews for the IPR publishes the names of the officers and the civilians already. So I don't know why the new board wouldn't be able to do that, but we wanted to sort of have a caveat. Co-Chair Hussaini, are you up for reading the actual text?
Maybe Sima is driving.
Yeah, I'm sensing a family.
And Co-Chair Dan,
instinct on it.
Commissioner Monica wants to comment. Go ahead, Commissioner Monica.
I would be happy to read it. That's what I was offering.
Oh,
Awesome.
go ahead.
All right. Number of cases involving either uses of deadly force or deaths in custody, as well as to the degree allowable by existing legal standards, details about how the board processed those cases, the outcomes were available, and the names of the involved parties.
Thank you, Commissioner Monica. Is there, and I know Commissioner Jumi also is happy to read. Is there any questions, comments, concerns about this addition? Okay. Oh, yes, Commissioner Sophia, go ahead.
Yes, I just wanted, because I'm looking at it now, I may have a comment on this. There was a public comment that came in, and I think it may have related to this. So I'm just going to hold off on what I want to say until I make sure. I just wanted to let you know that there was something that I thought might be relevant here that I'm just checking on. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Sophia. We're gonna wait, but if somebody remembers about that comment that would like to share.
Can I just read it?
Sure.
The public comment?
Yes, please.
That way everyone will know what I'm talking about. So we got advanced public comment from Mark Porras. Yes, I think it is. And it was considering the broader system, and this may not have anything to do with it, but somehow it just struck me that it might be relevant. The comment is, in the draft city code, section 35A.050, powers and duties of the board, item 1P, lists one of the items that will be in the annual report. And then he's talking about the number, nature, and settlement amount of civil suits against the Portland Police Bureau officers. Please also consider adding the amount of time, money spent on the city attorney's costs for each settlement, as well as time, money spent by risk management and other city employees on each settlement. So the board and the public will have better understanding of the cost of policing. So as I'm reading it now, that wasn't quite what I thought, but I know it had something to do with reporting. So I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I just wanted to make sure we didn't pass that up if it was relevant. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Sophia. Co-Chair Dan.
Yeah, so Commissioner Glenn, as the staff has indicated, that's actually the item above here. If you want to propose adding that language into P, let's finish Q, and then we can double back to that if that's something you think we should add in there in P. So if that's all right with you.
Sure, sure.
Okay, so otherwise we've read this in, and I don't know if we're done with discussion or not, but I'll turn it back over to you, Facilitator Lark.
Thank you, Co-Chair Dan. Is there any additional comments? We're gonna get to P, but before we want to finish with Q, as the Co-Chair stated. Okay, then I'm gonna ask the question. Is there a strong opposition to changing from what it was to the proposed change? And we're talking about Q. Is there a general agreement to changing from what it was to the proposed change? Thank you. Thank you. Then I believe we're going to P to add what Commissioner Sophia requested. Commissioner Sophia, do you have a specific language to add to P, the number 450?
I didn't. I just happened to see that we had passed it, and I didn't want to miss the opportunity. So what I'm going to say is I'm going to, just so I can give a little time for myself to get it together, I would like to hear any comments from any of the other commissioners about that and what their thoughts are.
Thank you, Commissioner Sophia. And we also, if people need more time, if commissioners need more time, we can also review this on Monday. But if somebody has a suggestion to add or to change for number 450P, please, let's hear the proposal. Yes, Commissioner Sophia?
If we don't have any comments, I propose to leave this till Monday, if that's okay.
There is one proposal by chat, in the chat. Co-Chair Dan, would you like to put it?
Sure. I mean, if it's all right with folks, number, nature, and settlement amount of civil suits against PPB officers, regardless of whether the city is a defendant in the litigation, comma, and the amount of time and city attorney's costs for each settlement. I wasn't thinking about how this was going to fit. Yeah.
Thank you, Co-Chair Dan. Commissioner Sophia, are you okay with this proposal?
I just wanted to, well, I think there's a little more I'd like in there, but because I'm not, I'm on the spot right now, I don't have my words in order. I'd like to propose something and then share with the group on Monday, if that's okay.
Okay, co-chairs, yeah, is that okay? We can leave this for Monday. Okay, thank you. I mean, it's 7:47. We can, co-chairs, we can continue or we can ask for a break. Okay. Let's take a break. Oh no, let's not. I don't know. I'm confused now. Okay. Let's do one or two more and then we ask for breaks.
That sounds good. So according to the list here, the next one is about qualification for the director. That's what we're looking at next, staff.
There are two proposed changes here. One is adding a new necessary and desired qualifications, and the other is the performance reviews text, which you could do together or separate at co-chair's discretion.
Okay, is there any comments, questions, or concerns about this?
I'm gonna see if we can have Commissioner Hussein or co-chair who's, oh, well, no, he's not available. So maybe Commissioner Delegato can read this one.
You want me to read both?
Why don't you read the first one, and then I think we should handle the second one second because it's a different kind of thing. So the first one is about a new requirement for the director's qualifications. So why don't you read just number 4?
Okay. Be trauma informed, possess an equity lens, and have experience engaging the community in collective decision making, and leading into the next section.
Thank you, Commissioner Jimmy. Is there any questions or comments about 1008, number 4? Okay. Let me ask the question. Is there a strong opposition to changing from what it was to the proposed change? Is there a general agreement to changing from what it was to the proposed change? Thank you. Can we move on? Thank you.
All right, so this other paragraph, and we had a little discussion about where it belongs, because this is under the section about the director, but this is actually about what the board has to do. but it also might get lost if we put it up because there's right now the section about the board's powers and duties goes from A through Y. So that means that we'd have to add a Z and we might end up in the double A's at the end. But anyways, the point is that it's we had written that the board should do annual performance reviews. I don't know, and manage the director was not part of, I think, this proposal. It was just, we know the board's managing director. Perhaps we can add that back to the beginning, Steph. I'm going to say, as part of its role in managing the director, the board shall at minimum conduct annual performance reviews of the director. And the words "at a minimum" were added at the suggestion of our equity analyst. So that's the idea, is to add this new section in that we and I read it all into the record. Sorry, everybody else. That we would add this in to be consistent with what we were asking the board to do.
Thank you, Co-Chair Dan. Is there any comments, questions, or concern? Okay, I'm gonna ask the question. Is there a strong opposition to changing from what it was to the proposed change to add in this part? Is there a general agreement to changing from what it was to the proposed change? Thank you. Can we move on to the next? Thank you.
All right, so where are we here? I left my mic open again. So we have training for staff, and this is more stuff that came from the equity review. That just language that wasn't there before. I'm going to go back to Commissioner Arce. I'm going to try to take turns here to read this into the record, if you wouldn't mind. So this was in the predecessor is in A. It says staff shall be trained on issues specific to the role, such as. Commissioner Arce.
I'll go straight down to line 8. Anti-racism, anti-bias, cultural competency, and collaborative decision-making. And goes to the next line.
Thank you, Commissioner Monica. Is there any questions, comments? Okay. I'm gonna ask if there is strong opposition to changing from what it was to the proposed change. Is there a general agreement to changing from what it was to the proposed change? Thank you. Can we move on? Thank you. Next.
So the next one has to do with qualifications for staff. And this, I don't remember where this exactly came from, but it adds potential areas of expertise that are specifically about, that could be useful for the investigators. And I'm focusing on it myself because I'm realizing that homicide investigations have to do with criminal conduct, and the investigations we're looking at are administrative. So I'm pondering that. Okay, so I'll ask Commissioner Delegato to read this entire paragraph.
Okay. C, preferred qualifications for office staff shall include working with community, being versed in contemporary legal topics related to policing, public defense or civil rights backgrounds, and investigative policy and/or management skills, such as civilian homicide investigation certification and use of force expertise. Investigative backgrounds can include child services, personnel, safety, housing, and medical and insurance investigations.
Thank you, Commissioner Yumi. I saw staff wanted to say something. I don't know, still is the case.
Yeah, this is one of the staff edits, and it has to do with possessing the qualifications for the cases that involve death in custody or officer involved shootings, for example, which there are increased powers for the oversight board relative to the current system related to those types of cases in the charter. And so ensuring that the investigations would be considered to be as rigorous on those and with their higher standard. There is a civilian certification for investigation of homicides and also separately use of force expertise in terms of being able to weigh in and adequately affected that. And it is accurate to say homicide is a term that is generally used in a criminal context, but the name of the certification, the generic name is civilian homicide investigation certification. Thanks.
Thank you. Is there any comments, questions, or edits? Okay. Is there a strong opposition to changing from what it was to the proposed change? Is there a general agreement to changing from what it was to the proposed change? Thank you. Can we move on?
Yeah, Facilitator Lars. So I'm also looking at the clock now. I'm realizing we still have to do public comment, next steps, and then we have to go into the executive session. So there are a lot of these are really easy and short. I know we also have our interpreters who haven't had a break. And just wondering, what do the rest of the commissioners think about just kind of knock out the last, 4 or 5 of these and do the rest of this agenda and then take a short break in between this and the executive session?
Let me ask, because we may have, since you asked and it's completely fine, please can you raise your hand and we can move through some of these fast, at least 4 or 5, as Co-Chair Dan suggested. You are okay with it? Okay, let's move on. Let's go.
Okay, so the next item is a very short one. In this paragraph, which is in the section about processing complaints, the types of complaints, the language that we used had to do with, and this one I can read into the record, or at least the one word into the record. The language that we used had to do with making sure that the case could be reopened in the interest of justice, and elsewhere we used the word accountability. And for continuity, staff suggesting that we put the word accountability there. Co-chairs discussed this before. Seems like it'll be okay. I mean, I think we all want to see justice happen as well, but that's the plan. So the word is, the word changes from justice to accountability, and perhaps Commissioner Delgado, is it your turn to read this?
You want me to read E?
Yeah, E.
If a complainant asks the board not to investigate a case that falls under the board's mandate in the charter, the board shall evaluate its legal obligations and weigh the interest of community concerns and the need for accountability against the wishes of the complainant and or their attorney, if there is one.
Thank you, Commissioner Yumi. Is there any comments, questions, or edits about that suggestion or concerns? Okay, I don't see any. Is there a general agreement? Is there a general agreement to changing from what it was to the proposed change? Thank you. Can we move on? And I will remind Co-Chair Dan that Commissioner Monica also volunteered to read.
I have that on my notepad. Next, Monica Arce. Okay, so the next one is that we had written that, and there's a long backstory to how this ended up in the existing city code, but that we'd we've taken that city code and said that the police bureau will inform the board immediately when they find out any officer or supervisor is engaged in conduct that might be subject to criminal or administrative investigation. And we didn't define what we meant by immediate. And, you know, it may be impossible to do it seconds after it gets learned, but we wanted to define what that was. And so it says 24 hours at the latest, basically. Commissioner Arce, would you read the exact language that we're proposing here?
By immediate, it is intended to mean without delay and in most cases, within 24 hours of occurrence.
Thank you. Okay. Is there any questions, comments, or edits? Okay. Is there, oh yes, Co-Chair Sima, please, go ahead.
Yeah, being the fact that without delay and in most cases within 24 hours of occurrences, I think the language is pretty good. A part of me that's asking a question in the back of my head, which should be quiet most of the time, is that rather than saying within 24 hours of occurrence, more or less thinking of like by immediate, it is intended to mean without delay, as in most cases, unless some kind of language placed in there saying that unless there's a reason, it should go beyond. And that's just food for thought for me. I think the language as it sits is pretty good, but I'm not sure if there's a layer that needs to be explored, or is this language cover all that?
Thank you, Co-Chair. It's a great question. Is there any comments from the commissioners about Co-Chair Sima question? There is a suggestion from Co-Chair Charlie in the text. Thank you very much, Co-Chair Charlie. And I also, please review it and let me know. But in the meantime, I will pass it to Commissioner Sophia.
I just wanted to make sure I understood Co-Chair Sima. You wanted to say within 24 hours, unless there's some, do you want them to provide a reason if they can't do it within 24 hours, or are you suggesting that it could be more than? That's my question. Thank you.
Well, I guess, yeah, a little bit of both, because want to know, like, okay, so by immediate, it is intended to mean without delay, and in most cases within 24 hours of occurrence. Well, we're still not necessarily like really understanding what the occurrence is that would allow it to go beyond 24 hours. So maybe if we were to put in language where it would be, we would have to be advised as to what the circumstances are going before beyond 24 hours, and putting it in code language that way. Therefore, there's an obligation within code language for us to be advised as to what are the extenuating circumstances, or whatever the reasons are. Not sure my words are come together properly for that part, but whatever the reasons are that would go beyond 24 hours.
Thank you, Co-Chair Sima. And there is also another comment by Commissioner Cameron. Co-Chair Dan.
Yeah, I appreciate Commissioner Brown's comment. So, Co-Chair Michelle Wesley's proposing, I think this is what she means by this, correct me if I'm wrong, by immediate is intended to mean without delay and unless for reasonable cause within 24 hours of occurrence. And I do understand that reasonable cause is a fluctuating term, but this is the board's rule, and they can decide what's reasonable cause or not. So I would like to propose Co-Chair Michelle Wesley's language to say without delay and unless for reasonable cause within 24 hours of occurrence, not in most cases.
Thank you. Is there any additional? Yes, Co-Chair Charlie, please.
No, I was just giving a thumbs up, but I can't find the thumb.
Okay, thank you. And Co-Chair Simabes also agree with what Co-Chair Dan's interpreter and what your suggestion, Co-Chair Charlie. Thank you very much. A teamwork. Okay, then I'm going to ask the question. Is there a strong opposition to changing from what it was to number 1535 and 1536, number 1, to what is proposed now? Is there a general agreement to changing from what it was to the proposed change? Thank you. Great. Can we move on? Okay.
All right, so the next one is actually two that are connected to each other. It's basically the same correction in two places, where we talked about when there's going to be an opportunity for the public to speak at hearings if they're open, if it's legal, that we had used the word opinion, and it's probably better to say comment instead of express their opinion, just that they can comment. And if somebody wants to read one, I guess we can read both of them into the record at the same time, even though they're the exact same language. When I'm getting a little seasick here. So the next person up to read, I believe, is Commissioner Delgado, and we'll go back to Commissioner Arce. Okay.
Okay. At the commencement of the preliminary hearing, the presiding individual shall state that members of the public who may have additional information or evidence should contact an assigned investigator prior to the full hearing. The presiding individual may allow members of the public to comment about the readiness of the case consistent with federal and state law and collective bargaining agreements. Do you want me to read the other one?
Yes,
thank you.
Please, because I am gonna ask the questions for both things.
Okay. 7, the presiding individual may allow members of the public to comment about the case consistent with federal and state law and collective bargaining agreements.
Thank
Right,
you.
so just to be clear, the first one's from the preliminary hearing and the second one is from the actual hearing.
Thank you, Commissioner Dan. Is there any questions, comments, or edits for these two? Okay, I'm gonna ask the question for both things. Is there a strong opposition to changing from what it was to the proposed change? Is there a general agreement to changing from what it was to the proposed change? Thank you. Can we move on? Commissioner Ajay, would you were agreeing or you have a question?
I was agreeing, sorry.
No, that's perfect. Thank you. Thank you for raising your hand.
Okay. So this next section, you know, Commissioner Iona and I have been working on trying to get these additional findings put into city code for a very long time. And so we're finally doing it, and we picked them up from San Francisco where they were called policy failure, training failure, supervisory failure, and communication failure. And is there one more, staff, underneath that? And equipment failure. But it was been pointed out that if we say failure, it sounds like we're making a finding against another officer in some cases. So we just thought it'd be better just to change the word to issues throughout. So policy issues, training issues, supervisory issues, communication issues, and equipment issues. Do people want us to read all of these into the record, or the fact that we're just talking about the headings, is that enough for people's appetite?
I think it's faster if you read just the number 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5.
Commissioner Arce, would you read 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5?
Here we go. 1, policy issues, meaning the board recommends that PPB revise its policy. 2, training issues, meaning the board recommends that Portland Police Bureau revise its training. 3, supervisory issues, meaning someone in the chain of command supervising the officer engaged in an action that contributed to the incident. 4, communication issues, meaning involved officers did not communicate well among themselves or information was otherwise not properly relayed by others to the involved officers. And 5, equipment issues, meaning the equipment provided did not function properly or was not adequate.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Monica. Is there any questions, comments, or concerns? Yeah, Commissioner Sophia. And then Commissioner and Coach Sima.
Yes, I wanted to go back to the equipment issues. Just looking real quick. And you're saying failure and a failure to deploy equipment properly, because I'm not sure how to say that, but if they don't use the equipment, it's not a failure, but it's a failure to actually turn it on or whatever. So I'm thinking of some language for that, and I'll listen for the comment from Coach Sima.
Thank you, Commissioner Sophia, and I will pass it to Coach Sima.
Right on the nose, right on the money, Commissioner Glenn. I was thinking of the exact same thing. I think I would, knowing the fact that the body worn cameras are going to be used, there was a report put out today where in California, I think 45 out of 100 unit officer in, I think it's Alameda County or something like that, were under review as well as arrest and trouble and all kinds of stuff. And a lot of the issues involved even purposely not utilizing it or even turning off their body worn cameras at certain times. There's certain functions that they're going to be responsible for. And so how does this actually hold somebody accountable, a law enforcement agent accountable for not using their equipment or, turning things off or manipulating the use of their equipment to make sure that, in these body worn camera issues, it wouldn't record what they're supposed to. A lot of hands everywhere.
Yes, a lot of hands. Thank you. Thank you, Coach Sima. And I will pass it to Commissioner Sophia, since she brought this, and then Commissioner Yumi, and then Commissioner Debbie, and then Coach Commissioner Sophia.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to add a story that it's not even a story, an incident that actually I know of personally, where as far as body worn camera concerned, the excuse was that they didn't have batteries or the batteries had failed as the reason why things, the evidence wasn't presented. And so I don't know how to resolve that, but I know that there are ways. We need to capture those kind of things as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Sophia. Commissioner Yumi?
Yeah, I share the concern, and I don't have any objection with adding language if we feel like that's the best solution. I do think that at some level, that is either going to fall into an out of policy finding that the officer failed to do something that they were supposed to do, or that there was a failure in the system, i.e. the equipment did not work correctly. I guess if we are to add language, it would be specifically for some sort of systemic negligence, which I think structurally at some level is supposed to be part of the sort of in policy, out of policy finding. So I'm not opposed to it, but I do think that's somewhat contemplated in the current language.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Debbie?
So my understanding about these sorts of findings is they're sort of an add-on. They're sort of like something happened that was, not good. And it wasn't, for example, let's take number one, the policy. So the officer followed the policy, but the board says, my goodness, something's wrong with this policy. the officer did what he or she was supposed to do, did what the policy said, but the policy needs to be fixed. And so these are sort of these extra ratings that you can add on to the allegations against the officer themselves. So that's what they're meant to do. And then like with equipment, you know, I feel like I remember there was a case not that long ago in Portland where the analysis showed that there was a problem with the walkie-talkies. The police were not able to function effectively because their walkie-talkies there was something wrong with them. The officers didn't do anything wrong. It was the walkie-talkies that were the problem. So you can add these extra ratings to the case or whatever they're called, to indicate that it was beyond the officer's control.
Thank you, Commissioner Debbie. Co-Chair Dan.
Oh, well, I want to underscore what Commissioner Delgado said, that this, you know, if an officer fails to start their body camera when they're supposed to, that's going to be the finding, you know, that deals with the officer. This is specifically if something goes wrong with the equipment. So, and then if they were trained improperly, if their policy is wrong, that's covered in the first two. So I think we don't need to change this language. I think we should, I mean, the point of addressing this section was just to change these one words from failure to issues. And I think we're covered for otherwise. And so I'm hoping we can just kind of consensus on whether to change these words. And if people want to continue to discuss the substance of it, I think we should put this off till Monday.
Thank you, Co-Chair Dan. Commissioner Monica and then staff.
So my understanding is that the officer's performance has already been evaluated before, and these are additional findings on top of that. So these are not the only findings for cases. The officer's performance is being evaluated already, and then these are additional findings that we can that can be identified as well, right?
You are correct. Thank you. Staff?
I'll actually wait until after this item, if that's okay.
Okay, then let me ask if there's additional comments. No, okay. I will ask the question. Is there a strong opposition to changing from what it was, and we're talking about 1 to 5, to changing from what it was to the proposed change? Is there a general agreement to changing from what it was to the proposed change? And Commissioner Sophia? Okay, thank you. Can we move on? Thank you. And I will pass it to staff.
Yeah, so thank you. I think it seems like there was a consensus not only to approve this, but also to talk about, you know, separating out what this clause, what this section's about, and where the if it was a separate failure policy on something like a choice not to turn on a body camera. I just wanted to mention that the next place that, or the place that would go would be in 35D060. Which is the types of conduct and complaints within board jurisdiction. So part B here, there's this long list of potential things. And I just encourage members to look that over and make sure it reflects what you want it to between now and Monday's meeting.
Okay.
And so that would be the sort of direct part of it. And then the clauses that were just updated are more of the additional, what Commissioner Debbie called an add-on. And I'll take it on to the next one now. 35.
Actually, you know, staff, I'm seeing it's already 8:19. We still have to do public comment and next steps, and then go to our executive session. So maybe we can just, those other two, I think will be pretty quick. Let's just do them on Monday. They'll be pretty quick, but not quick enough for us to get through what we need to do. We haven't had a break yet.
Yeah, if co-chairs are good with it, we'll do it.
Yeah, whatever you, I mean, is that your suggestion? We will do that. Then let's take a break.
Let's do the public comment and the wrap-up stuff, and we'll take a break before our executive session.
Okay, let's do that. Okay, let's take a public comment. Now it's time to take a public comment. Let me see the agenda. On the issues that PIC is discussing, our community members can also tell their story about policing and police accountability. We ask members of the public to keep their comments or questions to 3 minutes in length and raise their hand in Zoom if you like to speak. Members of the public, if you want to make a comment.
I don't see any hands up. Oh, wait.
Staff wants to speak.
Yeah,
Okay.
I just, one of the members of the public who's here put a question in the Q&A that may be relevant for a response. And staff probably can't respond to it, but if one of the members would like to, and I'll just to read it into the record, shouldn't the police, this was with relation to the definition of immediate is when this came in. Shouldn't the police at least be able to send an email or leave a message with the board that something happened, even if they don't fully express what happened within 24 hours, end quote.
Thank you, staff. Is there any comments regarding that question? Okay, if you're okay with the co-chairs, we can move to the next item on the agenda. The next item on the agenda is next steps and is member curiosities. Remember, member curiosities is a brief period of time on today's agenda where members of the commission can bring items to discuss. They might be questions or follow-up or an article that you have read that you like to share. We're not going to vote on anything during this time or to consent to anything. We want to give a space to multiple members to share. So please take 1 minute per person at most during this time. Okay, I don't think anybody has anything. Okay. We'll get 2 suggestions in a moment, but we'll start by asking if any members have questions about the PAC and its process that they'd like to have answered. Okay. We'll now open up to suggestions, follow-ups, etc. Does anyone have any member curiosities? No. Okay, I will pass it to staff for a draft report.
Thank you. So just real quick before we get into that, the draft report update, just a quick timeline on the code. The timeline for the overall PAC obviously ends very soon, 14 days. And so as a result, the intention from co-chairs and from staff in terms of the timeline is to conclude discussion on the code altogether on Monday, the 21st. And that wouldn't necessarily be the date that the final vote is done. There'd be some space in case there's something, you know, unexpected, but that effectively, in order to allow for the report to have its time to be discussed by you, and knowing that the report needs to explain the code has to be done by some time in order for that to happen. And so in order to do that, members will be asked to, ideally by tomorrow, give any proposed changes that they've got for the code in advance. If it comes in a little later, we'll make it work. But the more time in advance, the more smoothly the Monday meeting can go, because it gives more time for your colleagues to see what you've proposed. So that's a soft request, since it's not a hard deadline, but just a request to try and make that move smoothly. Moving on to the update on the draft report. The draft report segments are being put together by staff. The bulk of the actual content is going to be things that you've already worked on. There's going to be an appendix, which is going to be huge, which is the code. And it'll have all the sourcing, where is the original text? If it was something that was changed from 3.21, then it'll have a side-by-side comparison of what the old code is and the new code. Additionally, there'll be appendices with all of the different areas of agreement. An outline will get sent out so that members can get familiar with it. And the goal is to have a starting point draft out by Monday so that you can start looking at that too. And then really starting to dig deeply into that text by Thursday at the Thursday meeting. And that draft that'll go out on Monday, hopefully, Monday or Tuesday at latest, will also be public. So for members of the public who want to read the preliminary draft, it'll be noted that the PAC hasn't started talking about it yet, but to be transparent with it, it'll be posted publicly as well. Any questions on that process before I pass it back to facilitators? Yeah, thank you so much. And when you see the first version of the draft report, and you see the page count, please remember that you've seen 3/4 of it before, because it will be a very large page count. Thanks.
Thank you, staff. Okay, as a reminder, you now can submit advanced public comments to the Police Accountability Commission via web form, voicemail, or postal mail. Thank you to all the members who attended today's meeting and for your contributions today. Thank you also to the interpreters. Finally, thank you to the members of the community for attending and contributing with your thoughts and questions. If you are not already signed up for email updates, please also sign up to receive updates from the PAC. The next meeting of the Police Accountability Commission will be Monday, 21st from 6:30 to 9. It's now 8:26 p.m. and the public portion of the meeting is now adjourned. The PAC will now move into executive session pursuant to ORS 192660. We're gonna take a break. It is 8:27.